My name is Saviano, obviously. I am excited to be here. It feels a little bit weird talking to so much technology and so few people, but I will do my best to not be awkward. I'm a private practice therapist in Kansas City. I've been with Warriors Ascent for 4 or 5 years probably. I'm a DBT therapist and an EMDR therapist working with a lot of trauma. So we will go through the paperwork that you guys, I think, have access to, and if there's questions, we'll save them kind of for the end. But please do ask questions if there are, because I want to make sure that people are clear on this before we wrap up for the day. So starting just with what DBT is, dialectical behavior therapy, is a therapy originally intended for folks who have a high level of self-harm or suicidality, but also just a really great skills-based treatment. So at the top, like I said, if you have your hand out, the most fundamental thing about DBT is the idea that two things that are opposite can both be true. So that's what dialectics means. So a lot of times folks struggle with feeling one way but knowing they should feel a different way, or thinking they should feel a different way. And what DBT does is provide the space to kind of have both experiences and have it not, you don't have to pick one or the other. There's 4 modules. So if you're engaged in a DBT program, you're going to learn mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. The mindfulness piece is the real foundation. That's the real key to it all, is being able to be in the present moment and kind of observe things. So those mindfulness skills are observe, describe, participate, and we'll kind of go through those a little bit more thoroughly if you have that Venn diagram there. And take a look at how to get into wise mind. So there's two states of mind. We have emotion mind, which is pretty much how it sounds. That's kind of the high intensity, hot feeling, driven by emotion. What do you feel like doing? A lot of times this can be impulsive. These are the things that probably people in your life might be like, hey, that's not cool. Those are the behaviors that we want to kind of take a look at. Rational mind is very calm, cool, collected. A lot of times that means you're kind of shoving the emotions down. And what we want to do is figure out how to get people into that middle space, that wise mind, where emotion and rational mind overlap. That's the purple on my little drawing there. So the way to get into wise mind is by using what we call the how and what skills of mindfulness. So we have observe, describe, participate, one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively. So the what skills is what you want to do. First you observe, and you do these things one at a time. So first you observe, then describe, and then participate. So you want to pay attention to what's happening in your environment. Pay attention to what's happening in your body. Take in kind of all the facts, everything else, and then you participate however makes the most sense according to how you feel and actually what's going on. So it's a both and is kind of the fundamental dialectic. How skills, one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively. So how you want to do those what skills. So when we talk about observing, we do it one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively. When you talk about describing, one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively. One mindfully means you're doing things one at a time. So you're not scrolling your phone and talking to your kids and trying to work and drive all at the same time. You're doing one thing at a time. Non-judgmentally is maybe the hardest one for folks, and that is taking the judgment out of your observation and description. So instead of saying the weather is terrible, I hate this, it's cloudy, it's sunny, the temperature is 72, you're sticking with the facts. And that allows you to kind of disengage that emotional intensity if I cannot take it personally and not cast judgment on things. Effectively is about doing what works. So that means doing what life calls you to do, even if it's maybe not exactly what you want to do or what you would choose to do. It's about doing what works. So showing up to work on time probably is going to make your boss happy, even if you think your boss sucks. So showing up on time is being effective, even if it's not how you necessarily want to do things. So we talk about doing all of those, one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively, kind of in each moment. And those you can do concurrently. So you can do all 3 of those at the same time, and then you want to do the what skills one at a time. So really, if you've had a lot of trauma, if you've had a lot of negative experiences, you have intrusive thoughts, what we're kind of constantly, in Warriors Ascent, but in any kind of like therapeutic treatment situation, we're trying to get people to be in the moment and doing their life in a way that's congruent with their values and in a way that works, right? Because if you're getting a lot of negative feedback in your life, then it's probably not working. So that's what the DBT, and the fundamental thing of dialectics being that two things that feel opposite can both be true, is such the piece of DBT that I love so much, and it's like a little bit more robust than CBT in that way. And so we are able then to really be effective and present even when there's old stuff that might be creeping up. So that's what DBT is really excellent for. There's a ton of skills that go with all the different modules, the distress tolerance, emotion regulation. We may get into a few of those, I'm not sure. But DBT skills training is very structured and gives you tons of like practical actually skills to work with rather than just asking that we do better. So there's lots of acronyms, and it can be a really great therapy for that. Kind of just a brief overview too of CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. That's on the next page. Basically, the premise of cognitive behavior therapy is that if we change our thoughts and change our behavior, we're able to change kind of the external circumstances and how we're feeling about things, which is true, right? I mean, that makes sense. But there are kind of two directions that works, and I drew also a tiny little stick person there to illustrate this, that changing your thoughts, so that's a top-down approach, means changing kind of how you're thinking about things to change your physiological experience. Instead of thinking that the weather's terrible or that your boss is terrible or that everything sucks, it's changing toward either being just neutral and non-judgmental or moving more toward what else is also true. You know, you have a loving partner, or you have a car that runs, or you have parents that care about you, or whatever it might be, or it's just that it's sunny and that the temperature is pleasant. It might not be anything giant, but it's about changing your thought in order to change kind of how you're experiencing the world. Bottom-up approach is changing your physical self. So that's like doing something behaviorally different. It might mean moving. You guys just did some yoga with Carrie, I think. That's a huge bottom-up way to shift things. Any kind of exercise, Tai Chi, breath work, these are all the ways to change things from the bottom up. And that allows you to, sometimes when those thoughts are really ruminating and kind of going so fast, that you can't necessarily do something different with your thoughts, but you can do something different with your body. And so that allows you to both directions shift kind of what your experience is. Cognitive behavior therapy has been around forever. In your manual, if you were in a cohort, you would have had a list of cognitive distortions. We can run through some of those. I don't have them in front of me, but there's a list of maybe like a dozen different thinking errors that a lot of people find themselves kind of looping with. And it can be really, really helpful to figure out what are the ones that kind of get you caught up. Do you catastrophize, like everything is terrible, or it's never going to get any better, or I'll always feel that way? And when you hear those words kind of coming up in your thoughts, always and never, those really extreme ones, then you know that you're probably kind of in that catastrophizing space. Another one is kind of all or nothing thinking. And so that everything about your job sucks, or everything about your relationship has to be perfect, or else it's no good. And this is where dialectics kind of comes in together as well, because it's like both of these things are true. There's always going to be pieces of work or relationships or families or whatever that are challenging, that are unpleasant, and that we don't have to, throw the baby out with the bathwater in that thinking. If you recognize those thinking errors and can start to kind of back out of it a little bit and recognize that, oh, this is one of those cognitive distortions, all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, black and white thinking, that it's all this way or that way. like I said, there's a whole list of them in your manual and online as well that you can reference and start to get familiar with what are the thinking errors that you maybe use that are interfering with how you experience your life in the world. Because if that's coming up for you, then you can start to challenge those and recognize that the way that I'm thinking is not fact-based. It's not the only truth. You know, some people really like rainy weather and some people really prefer sunny weather. That doesn't mean somebody's right or somebody's wrong. So we can kind of back out of that commitment to right versus wrong or absolute truths when we start to do more mindful observation from that kind of like zoomed out space. Okay, so we're going to shift down to the ABC model and get into some of the System 1, System 2 thinking. And I'm just looking to see what all the notes are that you guys have. I drew this little chart because I do this for my clients all the time as a way to really illustrate how things happen and our emotional response is not just based on the thing that happened. And again, that kind of goes with that weather example of it's not that rainy weather is fundamentally bad. And so a lot of times people think, well, this event happened and I must have this kind of response. But the fact is that our response is based on our thoughts, our feelings, our previous life experiences, what's going on in the world, what's going on in our home life. And on a day that, you know, somebody cutting you off might not matter at all, it might not bother you. On a different day, it might make you totally bananas. So paying attention to what happened, and then how do I feel, that's that emotional response. But that emotion is really strongly determined by what I'm thinking and what's happening physiologically. So if somebody cuts me off and my first thought is, oh my gosh, what does that guy think he's doing? Who does he think he is? Blah, blah, blah. And then I can feel my heart rate increase and I can feel my hands, you know, grip the steering wheel a little tighter and I get mad and my face does all this like angry stuff. My body is responding as if there's something like legit bad happening that I need to deal with, which then might cause me, whatever the response is, to drive faster, zip around him, go give him the what for. This maybe is not the life you want to create or live or whatever. But if I'm not paying attention to what those thoughts and body sensations are, I think that just him cutting me off is what the problem is. But it might not be that. It's that I feel disrespected and I feel ignored and I feel agitated, and that creates its own next event, which might be getting pulled over or some other kind of consequence that I'm not really looking for. Or I get home and I'm all ramped up and then I yell at my kids and then, you know, then I feel bad about that and then they're upset and it turns into this whole thing. And if I'm not paying attention, then I'm not really even tuned into what all has happened. And so that's where those mindfulness skills of being able to observe, describe, participate, pay attention to what's happening externally but also internally, and what kind of meaning am I giving to things? Do I assume that somebody cutting me off is that who do they think they are and they're being disrespectful? Or do I assume that think they've got really important places to go? Or do I not care at all because it's not my problem? That might be the most peace-filled approach, is like, well, I'm just gonna get out of his way, but it's not something I'm going to lose a bunch of sleep over or get real agitated about, because that's not how I want my life experience to be. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done, right? And somebody cutting you off might be not the worst thing that ever happens to people. Most of the time, folks have had lots of other worse things. And so figuring out how to engage in the System 1 and System 2 thinking helps to slow things down, explore all of this, and be able to make a choice on the event and response kind of cycle, rather than just being subject to kind of in a defensive manner, just like life happens and you're just sort of constantly batting it down or trying to navigate it. That System 1 and System 2 thinking allows you to really slow things down, think slower. System 1 is that automatic first response, you know, that who does he think he is, and I'm gonna go get to the bottom of this. A lot of times it's physiologically more ramped up. You might have your heart rate or your breathing go higher than normal. You might recognize afterward that you were engaged in System 1 thinking because of what kind of results you get that are people telling you, like, You went from like nothing to hysterical in just a minute. And what is that about? And so when you're doing system 1 thinking, you are not being present and making choices as much as you're reacting to what's happening in a really fast and often unpredictable or just incongruent with your values kind of way. System 2 thinking encourages us to slow down, take a breath, be present, observe things. When we practice observing, when I practice this with my clients, a lot of times it's a grounding exercise of really like pushing my feet into the ground and feeling the chair underneath me, maybe doing something like this to push my hands together and get more connected to my body. Observing what's happening in my environment, like I'm in a room with green walls and there's a lot of lights and cameras, and how might that kind of be influencing me? And if I know that that makes me nervous, then I can take a breath and kind of engage that system 2 thinking because I know how to slow things down. We want to be in system 2 because that's where we get to choose a path instead of just kind of bulldozing through life or being super numb through life, because I think people with lots of probably the histories that you guys have are one or the other, like full speed ahead without kind of looking around and making choices, or on the other side of that spectrum and kind of numb and shut down and just going through the motions. But neither side of that is really living what Marsha Linehan calls a life worth living, and she's the one who created DBT. So that idea of really living on purpose and making choices and showing up in a way that is congruent with your values and fulfilling, and system 2 thinking helps us get there, because I can check in with myself and say, like, how do I want to be? How do I want to be with my family? How do I want to be with my partner or my coworkers or my friends? And how do I want to feel about myself and my choices so that I can kind of like go to sleep at peace and live really intentionally according to the values that I've figured are mine for myself, not, you know, what you were told growing up or maybe by the military or wherever else, where it's like, here's all the things you're supposed to do that you're choosing when you're engaged in system 2 thinking. This is automatic versus chosen kind of responses as well. And we don't ever even know what the difference is until we slow down and back up and kind of start paying attention. If you came to one of the cohorts, you would have spent a fair amount of time doing daily thought records. And I think you probably have a format for that in your handouts today. Oh, I see. If not, it's in your original paperwork or online. The daily thought record is a little bit tedious and takes a good amount of time, which is what is also helpful about it, because it really allows you to slow down and get into that system 2 headspace and paying attention to kind of the whole experience that you're having. And so there's a column for keeping track of the day and the time and kind of what was going on ahead of things. You know, did you wake up late and you're already running late to work, and then you forgot to pack your lunch, and then you get to work? So you're paying attention to all these little things. In DBT, we also call it a behavior chain analysis. There's lots of different words for this. But it's basically after you have an event that has maybe caused you distress, or you're having thoughts that are really upsetting, that you can pause, fill this chart out, and look at, so what are the thoughts that I'm having? I'm stupid, this sucks, it's not fair. Any of those kind of negative cognitions, or if you're engaged in any kind of thinking errors, I'm always going to feel this way, they hate me because they didn't call me back, whatever sort of thoughts that you're having that are causing distress that may or may not be true, those are the things that you're going to start listing out on there. And then you use the next column for really kind of challenging those. Like, maybe they don't hate me and that's not why they called me back. Maybe they were busy, maybe their phone was off. Maybe they have something going on in their life. So you kind of counter the thoughts that you are having so that you can start, again, with the zooming out and kind of mindfulness stance of taking a moment to see what else could be true. Because what I've seen in the decade of practice that I've had is that people in the heat of a moment often don't have an accurate perception of what's actually going on. Sometimes I've had happen that this person left me this voicemail and they were so terrible on the voicemail and they said all these terrible things on this voicemail and it was my doctor's nurse and I can't believe she would talk that way, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that sounds terrible. Let's listen to this voicemail. Let's see what the deal is. Then they play the voicemail and it's not quite as bad as it sounded, because when they listened to it, they had just gotten off work and they were tired and they were stressed, and what actually was a kind of benign voicemail felt really terrible. So we know that our feelings do not always back up what's actually going on. Our feelings are not facts. And so as you do the thought record, the daily thought record, you can start to see where, I know for me that like 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when I'm tired and kind of hit that slump, and so I don't see clients at 3 o'clock because I know that's not my best work. But I don't know that if I'm not paying attention to what time of day I'm feeling tired, or what clients I'm kind of maybe not as present for as I would like to be. And doing that daily thought record starts to help kind of get a sense of that, be more clear. And then you can start to choose, again, how you want to respond. How do you want to show up? Instead of just continuing to kind of push forward, you can start to make some shifts in your life and how you're thinking, and start to challenge that so that you're creating just a better experience for yourself, which of course then is a better experience for the people who care about you and that you have in your life that you want. I'm putting all of this out there, and it's obviously super challenging, especially if you have been engaged in some of these thinking patterns for years, decades, your whole life. And I get that. It's not certainly expected that we can give you some of this skills training and then just have it be totally fine and you're gonna like not ever relapse. So a big piece of doing this kind of work is really being compassionate and being gentle on yourself, and keep coming back to, I've been through a lot of hard stuff, and also this is that dialectical thinking, I can get better and do better, and I've gotten better and done better, and I've already seen that. Even just showing up here to this webinar or to a cohort or whatever means that you're making those steps, and that's a huge deal. So to cut yourself some slack, give yourself credit for continuing to work on this, even when it's hard. I've mentioned values a few times, and I don't know if anybody's had a chance to do kind of a values assessment. You can find lists of values all over the internet. Brene Brown has a really good one, and we've used her footage in the cohort. I don't know if anything today will pop up for that, but she has a really good list of values that I use to have people kind of go through, highlight what are the things that they want their life to be lived according to. And once you start to look at, what do I want my life to be about? Do I want it to be about peace? Do I want it to be about kindness, or taking care of the environment, or raising really good kids, or whatever it might be, that as you are choosing those values and looking at really what you want to have kind of motivating your life, and I have people narrow it down to like 2, which is hard because the whole list is good. Everything on it, you're like, yes, that's what I want my life to look like. But if you can get it down to 2 or maybe 3, that helps to really inform those decisions, because then when you're in this cycle of challenging your thoughts and all that, you can have curiosity as one of my highest values. So when I'm debating on what to do, then it's, well, I know that I want to be curious. I know I want to lead with curiosity and being connected to other people. So here I am, even though I'm also feeling super weird about being on all these cameras, I was also curious, and I want to be connected to people, and right now this is the way to do it. So that's what kind of pushes those decisions when you know what your values are. It just makes it easier, and you're not having to recreate wheels every time you're making a decision about things. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Anna. What was the name again you just referenced?
Marsha Linehan?
Sorry?
Was it Marsha Linehan?
That's it.
Yeah, she was the developer of DBT. I will say, as sort of a disclaimer, if you start Googling DBT, a lot of what comes up is about borderline personality disorder, because that was the first kind of application. That's what she set it up for, because those folks were showing up and not getting the level of clinical care and the level of compassion. And DBT really has both, like high standards for clinical care, but also a real emphasis on I get it and what you're doing isn't working. So, because these are folks with like lots of self-harm and that kind of behavior, which is super stigmatized, and some of the stuff you may come across on the internet if you start down that path could make you feel slightly terrible. So just don't pay any attention to that. DBT is a great mode of therapy, even if that's not a thing that you have going on, or if it is, either way. But the skills training is really, I mean, I use it every day. I teach all my clients different kinds of DBT skills, no matter what kind of suicidality or self-harm they have going on, because it's just really like life skills. But she's the original gal.
Okay, can you spell her last name for me, please?
Linehan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate you. So anyone else? I think some people are self-muted, meaning I'm having trouble unmuting you. So hold on, let me see. There's also the chat function, everyone. So yeah, for some, let me see. I'm trying to unmute everybody, but I'm having some trouble. All right, you all have control to unmute yourselves, so please, you should see the microphone. There you go, Melissa. There you are. Speak to us.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
So, a lot of what you're, I'm actually a mental health professional, and not a really good one right now because my mental health kind of sucks.
Okay.
Which is kind of exactly what you were just talking about with all the like the thinking issues and stuff like that. So what are like some suggestions when like you know what to do and you know like what you quote unquote should do?
Sure.
But you can't access your own set of good skills.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because nothing that, I mean, maybe I ever say is all that clever or new, right? It's all stuff that feels pretty straightforward. And that can really lead people into some kind of shame space, because it's like, I know what I should do. I know all the things and I just can't do them. So I would definitely start with some self-compassion and being gentle. When I have folks that are stuck in that, I'll have them kind of do just a breath with your hand on your heart and your stomach to just get into your body and take a breath. And if that's like all you do and you lay in bed the rest of the day, I think that that's fine. Being easy on yourself and allowing for even teeny tiny bits of goodness to count. Because I think a lot of times too, people are like, well, if I can't spend 45 minutes exercising, then why bother? I know I'm supposed to exercise, but I don't have time for all that. If you stand up and like try and touch your toes or stretch straight up or do a down dog or any of the like little things you just did with Carrie, any of those kind of movements is signaling to your system that you care and that you're willing to take care of yourself, even if you don't have the 45 minutes or whatever you think you should be having to do. And to just keep coming back into like just this very second, because it's so easy to get caught up in the like all the things you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do this every day for the rest of your life, which to me is really daunting. So instead it's like, what can I do right this second? Maybe it's brush my teeth. Maybe it's brush my hair. Maybe it's smile. One of the distress tolerance skills in DBT is called a half smile. And that's so the distress tolerance skills are the ones that we use in the moment to deal with a stressful situation. Emotion regulation skills are the things that we ought do every day, kind of ongoingly, to have a stable, more of a stable framework. But distress tolerance half smile is just like a teeny tiny smile, not even that maybe somebody could see, but it signals to your nervous system that like things are okay. It's a way of activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation side of things, that says, I'm okay. Maybe I'm not great, like we don't need to get crazy here, but like it's okay. A deep breath can do the same thing. Humming, gargling, these are some kind of like weird things that also activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Singing, which, you know, maybe that's something you can do really easily. Maybe that's a giant challenge. But finding some of those things that allow you to just be right in this moment without getting caught up in that thought space of like, I know all the things I should do. And I think you said you are a mental health professional, which makes it even worse because it's like,
DBT therapist.
okay. Yeah, so when we know all the things we're supposed to do, that makes it even harder. And that's why I usually like to start with those body up interventions rather than just trying to change how you're thinking, because your thoughts are going to give you a real trip otherwise, because it's going to feel like, well, you should know what to do because you do know what to do and you just can't do it, and what's the matter with me and I suck and all that. So try and go from the bottom up stuff is what I would say is going to be the easiest, you know, lowest barrier to entry, I guess. Does that help? Does that make sense? One other thing while you guys are kind of coming up with questions, a thing that I just thought of, Melissa, kind of to go with your question again, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do physiologically and therapists that you can kind of seek out that do things like EFT, which is emotion focused, emotion freedom. There's two different EFTs. One that has to do with tapping that's kind of an acupressure point, kind of like a cousin to acupuncture. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, somatic experiencing, any of these things that get into your body and help. A lot of times it's through like a bilateral kind of movement, but help move along what's happening, because what we know about trauma is that it is stored in your brain and in your body in different kinds of cellular ways. That is a little bit above my pay grade to speak to too much, but that allows you to move it through. So basically there are 4 things you can do to kind of heal trauma. Attunement is part of it, so that's like a therapeutic kind of interaction piece. Empowerment, the bilateral, so cross body, anything you can do that alternates. Sometimes this looks like rocking. You can do it while you walk. If you do EMDR, it looks like this, or tapping your knees, or a butterfly hug. These cross body actions, and ritual. So when we talk about empowerment and ritual, those are habits that you can kind of set up in your life, where maybe the ritual is, for me, every single morning before I even get out of bed, I drink a glass of water, because that is, you're dehydrated after sleeping. I know that my brain will be better off if I start with water and not coffee, and that's just part of my everyday ritual. I also try and think about things I'm thankful for every night before bed. Moving every day is part of ritual. Talking to people that you care about can be part of a ritual, maybe just drinking a cup of tea in the afternoon. Any of these things that create a ritual for yourself, and especially one if it's also empowering, these are paths out of trauma. And so those are also kind of those bottom-up physical things that we talk about that can help challenge the thoughts that maybe are negative. So that is another sort of avenue. And like I said, seeking out therapists and support people that have these different kinds of experiences can be a big piece of that.
All right. I've got some of the questions have now popped up.
Okay.
So Kay writes,
Hi, Kay.
When overwhelmed, how do you use System 1 and System 2 thinking to slow down and regulate your thoughts?
Take a deep breath, like I just did. That's always first. I mean, I think no matter what, is to take a breath, maybe check in with your body, because that System 1 is just the automatic, I'm not tuned into anything that's really happening. I'm just firing off what I think is, not even thinking, just firing off the next thing. System 2 comes on board when you take a breath and can get connected, grounded, etc., and really take stock. So that allows you to use mindfulness skills, observe what's going on. This person's raising their voice, and I know that when somebody raises their voice at me, I'm likely to be reactive. So maybe I need to ask for a break. That would be engaging system 2. Really trying to find a pause in what's happening. I would say not to make any kind of decision, like give it 30 seconds, give it 30 minutes. Depending on the circumstance, obviously different things will be available, but being able to back up, pause, slow things down, check in with your body, check in with when was the last time I ate? When was the last time I drank some water? Have I eaten anything? Because a lot of times, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come into my office and tell me kind of what they eat and drink. And I'm like, well, no wonder you feel like garbage all the time. You're so caffeinated and you only eat candy, which I have no judgment of because I love candy. But it definitely does not set your brain up to perform optimally. So checking in with what am I giving myself to work with here? Do I sleep, 4 hours and it's fitful, or am I getting a good night's sleep and I'm pretty well hydrated? Then I can really perform more in line with how I want to and slow things down. And I would talk to whoever you need to talk to get those things addressed. Doctors, therapists, alternative medicine, whatever it might be, the folks that can help get those really basic things. Because if you're not sleeping and you're not hydrated, you don't eat moderately well, you're not giving yourself the proper tools to engage these things anyway. So I would start with some of that as far as like the overarching thing to do to get into system 2 more. But in a moment, I would say breathing, inhale and exhale for twice as long. There's a 4-7-8 breath that is popular, I guess, where you inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. So that can be a good practice. I would also say be practicing these things ongoingly, right? That's what emotion regulation skills teach us. And that is the stuff that increases our window of tolerance and decreases the intensity of our emotions. And the emotion regulation skills are the things that we do every day that have a cumulative effect of making us more stable, responsive rather than reactive, and that kind of thing. So it allows us to, if I practice breathing every day, it's more available when I need it than if I don't ever do anything and then there's a situation I need to respond to and I don't have any kind of baseline for that. I love EMDR. I think it is an amazing tool. Really, yes. I think that the thing, if you aren't super familiar with EMDR, the thing that I love about it is that you don't have to walk through every single bit of trauma you've ever experienced. And a trained clinician can kind of get at those things without having to be like, tell me all the nitty-gritty details. Because a lot of times, one of the barriers to really doing trauma work is that people don't want to come in and tell their story again to another person and go through all the terrible details. And you don't have to do that. And Jeff may speak to this a little bit more. He's also an EMDR therapist. But absolutely, I think getting a really good trauma therapist for that, and EMDR is a really good tool to get some relief of those symptoms without having to go through every bit of that. Or, if you want to process the actual story of it too, that's the way that EMDR works, is that it is moving from the emotional limbic system part of your brain into the prefrontal cortex, where you're able to have a story about it that is not so activating, and that's how it works. So I would say yes. Hi, Tim.
What kind of alternative medicines are you referring to, or what maybe would you suggest?
I mean, I guess that's such a broad category. I really like EFT. I don't know how alternative things are. That's the tapping. I like it because it's a way of getting past the distress tolerance. Because you pair it with a thought like, even though this terrible thing happened, even though I yelled at my kid, even though I lost my whatever paycheck, I fully love and accept and forgive myself. So you're pairing both. I like that. I have only just kind of dipped my toe into acupuncture, which I also think is awesome. I don't think meditation counts anymore as alternative, but that is a huge thing that I think people should all be doing, at least, taking time to kind of be present, paying attention to the distractions, somatic experiencing, and that kind of trauma release therapy are those physical kinds of interventions where you're allowing your body to release the energy of the trauma that's kind of stored at a cellular level. So maybe not super alternative necessarily.
So, geez, with that, everyone, I think, Anna, do you have any parting shots for us?
I don't think so. This has been more fun than I anticipated.
You've been wonderful. We appreciate you, and thank you.
Yes,
I know
thank
it's a little
you.
bit quirky, kind of speaking to a computer and all this audio-visual equipment, but you did wonderfully and brilliantly.
Thanks,
in this case.
guys.
So thank you so much.